Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. I'm Matt Barbet. Coming up, Prince Harry gets an apology from the publishers of The Sun. The Duke of Sussex settles his long-running legal battle, getting substantial damages as Rupert Murdoch's News Group newspapers admit unlawful news gathering and a serious intrusion into his private life.
Today, the lies are laid bare. Today, the cover-ups are exposed, and today proves that no one stands above the law. The time for accountability has arrived.
Tonight, I'll be speaking to a former tabloid editor and looking at what's next for Murdoch's media empire. Also coming up, a man pleads guilty to murdering the wife and two daughters of racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack. Plus, ahead of the Southport sentencing tomorrow, the government says tougher checks on people buying knives online will now be fast-tracked. But is it going to make any difference? And the songwriting trio behind some of the biggest hits of the 80s and 90s get their very own blue plaque. I'll be speaking to Pete Waterman about that and joined by artist Sunita as well. That's all to come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Good evening, good to have you with us. First tonight, we start with what Prince Harry's legal team is calling a monumental victory. The Duke of Sussex received a full apology and substantial damages from the publisher of The Sun in his privacy invasion lawsuit at the High Court early today. Rupert Murdoch's News Group newspapers admitted The Sun had engaged in the unlawful gathering of information and apologised for a serious intrusion into the Duke's private life. It's a moment that represents vindication for Harry after years of taking on the tabloids, as our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills explains.
Waiting in anticipation for the start of this long-awaited trial. Instead, Prince Harry's barrister had news of a settlement.
In a monumental victory today, News UK have admitted that The Sun, the flagship title for Rupert Murdoch's UK media empire, has indeed engaged in illegal practices. This represents a vindication for the hundreds of other claimants who were strong-armed into settling without being able to get to the truth of what was done to them.
How are you feeling, Prince Harry?
Since 2019, Harry has waged this battle against the publishers of The Sun and the News of the World. One of two final claimants prepared to take them to trial, take the financial risk, and make them talk in open court about the illegal tactics he said were used to gain stories about him. The statement from News Group newspapers is a catalogue of apologies for the serious intrusion by The Sun between 1996 and 2011, for the first time admitting to unlawful activities at The Sun. An apology for phone hacking and surveillance by the News of the World. And a wider apology for the serious intrusion into his private life and, more strikingly, his mother's, Princess Diana. Media litigation specialist Antonia Foster says it's extraordinary how far they've gone.
What it says about Prince Harry's mother, and we know from all the public statements he's made in the past, just how important that issue is to him and the treatment, as he sees it, of his mother by the press. The apology in respect of the treatment of her is very significant.
Good afternoon, everybody.
As recently as December, he's spoken of his determination to get justice.
One of the main reasons for seeing this through is accountability, because I'm the last person that can actually achieve that, and also closure.
Tom Watson, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party and Harry's co-claimant, was full of praise for everything he's done.
I once said that the big beasts of the tabloid jungle have no predators. I was wrong. They have Prince Harry. His bravery and astonishing courage have brought accountability to a part of the media world that thought it was untouchable.
In recent years, Prince Harry has described taking on the tabloid press as his life's work, which means that reaching this settlement will not have been an easy decision for him to make, mainly because he also wanted News Group newspapers in court to admit there'd been some kind of cover-up by senior executives, which in their apology they do appear to acknowledge, but without admitting doing anything illegal. They have apologised for wrongdoings in the past, a victory for now. but not the end of his moral crusade and determination to stop history repeating itself. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, the publishers of The Sun news group newspapers may have offered a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry, but it also pushed back on some of the allegations made about its journalists and whether they broke the law. However, the settlement increases the pressure on former Sun News of the World editor Rebecca Brooks, who remains chief executive of News UK. Sky's Gurpreet Narwan takes a look now at the history of the phone hacking scandal and where it might go from here.
Thank you and goodbye. Parting words from the News of the World, which closed down almost 14 years ago now, after accusations that its journalists were hacking phones came to light. Victims included the murdered schoolgirl Millie Dowler.
This is the most humble day of my life.
Rupert Murdoch, the paper's proprietor, was publicly shamed and even attacked in Parliament. Journalists were jailed, although Rebecca Brooks, who edited the paper from 2000 to 2003 and then The Sun until 2009, was cleared. She is now chief executive of the parent company, News UK. A public inquiry known as Leveson also followed, and Murdoch's companies have since paid out £1 billion to settle claims. The News of the World fell on its sword, but today The Sun was in the spotlight. NGN, publisher of both papers, apologised to Prince Harry and for the first time admitted that illegality took place under The Sun's name. But it refused to implicate its own journalists, instead blaming private investigators contracted by the paper. An apology, but Prince Harry didn't get his day in court, meaning his previous claims that there was a corporate cover-up at NGN will go untested. Nevertheless, he will consider the company's admission of illegal activity connected to The Sun, as well as the News of the World, significant. Campaigners say this is another turn in a story that has some way still to run.
We've no idea who committed those unlawful acts, who was responsible, who were the senior people who signed it off, if any, and all of these issues do need to be properly investigated. And to get to the bottom of this, we're going to need either a police investigation or the second stage of the Leveson inquiry.
Among those now under scrutiny over previous statements, Rebecca Brooks.
I can say absolutely that the Sun is a very clean ship, a great newsroom.
But News UK continues to deny many of the accusations against the paper. There are strong controls and processes in place at all our titles today to ensure this cannot happen now. There was no voicemail interception on The Sun. It must also be stressed that allegations that were being made publicly pre-trial and indeed post-settlement that News International destroyed evidence in 2010-11 would have been the subject of significant challenge at trial. These allegations were and continue to be strongly denied.
I think both sides would claim they've won. I think Prince Harry can be pleased that he's got this full and unequivocal apology. On the other hand, I think the publishers themselves, news groups, can be pleased that they haven't had to go to court, they haven't had to see their witnesses giving evidence.
This may herald the end of years of expensive court action. But for NGN and the wider tabloid press, there could be more uncomfortable headlines to come. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills is here with me in the studio. Hi, Rhiannon. This has been, well, a decades-long fight, really, for Prince Harry, because it goes all the way back to his childhood, really, doesn't it?
And we had a stark reminder of that, didn't we? Right there, inserted in the middle of the apology, the name of his mother, Princess Diana, and the fact that news group newspapers actually apologised to her as well. She wasn't a claimant in this case. This was his case. And yet, I think it gives a very clear indication of just how hard Prince Harry and his team would have negotiated this settlement. For him, it wasn't about the money. People may laugh at that because we're talking about potentially over £10 million in a settlement. It's huge. But for him, it was about news group newspapers admitting some kind of liability, holding their hands up and saying, yes, we did something wrong, which they have not done with any of the other claimants. And also, I think, obviously, for him, it touches on the fact that this has been so personal for him.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about what they did to him, it was about what they did to his mother. And that has really fired him up right along the way to keep going with this campaign of his.
Well, quite, and it doesn't seem to stop there. We heard Lord Tom Watson saying that Harry's the big beast who's taking down the papers for his perceived wrongdoing, and it's going to continue.
I think today they will obviously take a breath. They will celebrate this as a big victory, not just because of the extent of the apology, but also because they've had that platform today to say, well, we want the police and Parliament to investigate this. This needs to go further. But also, you have to remember, these are apologies for historical wrongdoings. Harry still has huge issues with how he's dealt with by the press now. He's accused them of intimidating him and Meghan because he was following this court action. We know there's also a case still outstanding against the publishers of the Daily Mail as well. So I think while, today there will be time to kind of take in this victory, I can't see this being the end of what has been a very personal moral crusade for him.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Well, we're going to bring in now the former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, and Rebecca Young, who is head of media law at JMW. Solicitors, good evening to you both. Paul, I'm going to start with you for your reaction to what happened today.
Well, the word monumental was used by Prince Harry's lawyers and on behalf of Prince Harry, and I think for once it wasn't hyperbole. It's a startling statement from the news group newspapers, and it really will not be the end of the story, I fear, because there will be great pressure probably from Labour MPs and Lib Dem MPs in particular to follow up Tom Watson's call for a parliamentary investigation, or Leveson Part 2, which I don't think Keir Starmer will be too keen on at the moment, with public inquiries almost coming out of his ears. But the pressure will be on. At the very least, I would expect there to be some sort of hearing or inquiry by the cross-party Culture and Media Select Committee.
Just very quickly, I mean, let's put people in the frame on Leveson Part 2. The Leveson inquiry started, well, years ago now, 13, 14 years ago, something like that. And it was always meant to be in two parts. But I think it was in 2018 the Commons voted to not have the second part. That's the case, isn't it, Paul?
That's absolutely right. But of course, that was under a Conservative government who were opposed to Leveson Part 2, arguably because they were very close to the Murdoch group. But now you have a large Labour majority and with the Lib Dems, and they were very much in favour of Leveson Part 2, or at least a large number of Labour MPs and Lib Dem MPs were. But and the police investigation may or may not happen. Harry's legal team say they're going to pass over all the evidence they say they have to the police. And of course, the pressure on the Met will be considerable. I'm told there's already an early scoping exercise going on. We don't know where that will lead. But of course, you've got the Al Fayed case. The Met at the moment are under pressure over past failings, and there were accusations of them being too close to the news group. So there will be a lot of pressure on the Met to at least look closely at whether there is merit in having a new criminal investigation.
Rebecca, let me come to you on this because, well, look, just give us your insight on what was likely happening as this case looked like it was going to start, but there was all that horse trading and bargaining going on behind the scenes. Can you shed a little bit of light on what that kind of stuff is like, given that it all happened behind closed doors and a lot of us would love to have been a fly on the wall there?
Well, we were all surprised, I think, over the past 24 hours. There's been a flurry of activity. The trial, which was supposed to run for 8 to 10 weeks, was due to start yesterday. But we understand that there have been these conversations and this dialogue ongoing behind closed doors. There was a number of delays which were requested. So yesterday ended with delays being requested, that being refused by the judge. So even the judge was surprised by all of the flurry of activity, he was very much ready to get going and start with the trial. And today we've learned of the settlement, which is surprising on several levels, in that publicly News Group have always strongly defended their position, and Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, has always stated that he felt that he was the last one of the claimants to bring this claim, and there was a personal level. He wanted to see almost the trial be used as an inquiry into the business practices and the culture. So on all levels, I think we've been surprised by what's happened over the past 24 hours.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. If the case had continued, then there would be an awful lot more detail now, or coming, in the public domain than we're otherwise going to get, Rebecca.
There would be. So the hearing is going to be a public hearing, which will have brought a level of scrutiny that hasn't yet taken place. So broadly, we know what the allegations are. Prince Harry's claim is one for the unlawful gathering of information, but we don't know the detail of that. It hasn't been widely reported in the press in terms of what those activities are alleged to be, who is alleged to have been involved with those activities, and what the articles are. So that there would have been that scrutiny, and the court would have been asked to examine those allegations, and may very well been, as part of that, looked at the business practices and the culture within the Sun and within News Group.
Paul, you were going to come in on that, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
One consolation for News Group, and there aren't very many here, is that they were, at least by this settlement, which I'm told, but between damages and costs, is probably nearer 20 million for Prince Harry and Tom Watson. But the consolation is they have been spared what could have been 8 weeks of relentless headlines and broadcast coverage, with a stream of witnesses, including whistleblowing journalists, including former victims prepared to talk about what had happened with them, including people like Hugh Grant and Sienna Miller. And even Gordon Brown, I'm told, the former Prime Minister, who had his own allegations of alleged malpractice by News Group, was prepared, I gather, to either appear as a witness or at least make a witness statement for Harry's team.
And Paul, it doesn't really end here. I mean, I appreciate that your all employers have been through it already. We've now obviously had the Sun do what's happened today, and then there is action pending against the owners of the Mail as well. And this is all continuing.
It is. Now, the Mail are strenuously denying the allegations, and I suspect that they will fight on, but I'm sure their lawyers will be studying this case very closely. But it's going to linger on, and of course, Rebecca Brooks' position, will at least be under question. Rupert Murdoch's incredibly loyal to her and brought her back after she resigned in 2011, brought her back as CEO in 2014.
Yeah.
But you heard what Harry's lawyer said about her, and I'm sure Rupert Murdoch will have to, lawyer as he is, will have to be studying how this one shakes out, as it were. It is going to be a lot of pressure brought to bear, and I think this is a story that, although 8 weeks of a court case have gone away for a one-day settlement hearing, the political and fallout is far from over.
But Paul, they close the News of the World because of this kind of thing. I mean, is the Sun at risk of the same thing?
I don't think that's going to happen. Although the Murdoch family and the Murdoch board will have to look at the reputational damage that will ensue here, but how serious it is will be under consideration.
Yeah.
Shareholders may be unhappy. I mean, there are shades of a certain TV drama series about a media baron family, which was allegedly based not much on the Murdoch family. So this is almost Succession.
You can say Succession, yeah. We know you're talking about Succession. Don't you worry about that. I mean, people have made those plenty of comparisons. Let's get back to the real world, Rebecca, just to finish off. I mean, Paul mentioned Leveson 2 and all that kind of thing. Do you really think that could be back on the agenda now, and there could be more looks at potential regulation of the press? Because so far, it's largely, when it comes to print media, of course, largely been self-regulating via membership of IPSO.
I think that's a conversation that is probably going to be reopened. In terms of what might follow from this, in terms of any future civil claims, largely those are going to be out of time now. So this is pretty much the point at which these claims, sort of a line is drawn in the sand unless any claims have already been issued. We look to see whether or not there will be any criminal investigations that will take place following the dossier that Prince Harry's barrister referred to outside of court earlier today when that's handed over. So we'll look to see how that unfolds. But I think that it's fair to say that there's going to be an ongoing conversation about what this means in terms of the press and wider regulation.
Well, glad you could both join me for the conversation on it this evening. That's Rebecca Young and Paul Connew. Thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure.
You are watching the UK Tonight here on Sky News. We'll have more on Kyle Clifford later, the man who's pleaded guilty to the murder of 3 women with a crossbow in Hertfordshire last summer. I'll also be speaking to a knife crime campaigner as the government promises to now make it tougher to buy knives online. And ahead of Axel Rudikabana's sentencing in Liverpool tomorrow, Sarah Jane returns to Southport to speak to community leaders there.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Welcome back. A man has pleaded guilty to murdering the wife of racing commentator John Hunt, as well as 2 of their daughters, in a crossbow attack in Hertfordshire last July. Kyle Clifford denied another charge of rape and will now face trial later on this year. Our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt, has more.
In earlier court hearings, former soldier Kyle Clifford had denied the murders. Now he's pleaded guilty. The killings shocked the Hertfordshire community, where his victims were well known and much loved. He stabbed Carol Hunt, aged 61, many times. Her daughters Hannah, who was 28, and 25-year-old Louise he killed with crossbow bolts. Louise was his former girlfriend. They were the family of racing commentator John Hunt. He said he and his other daughter Amy's devastation could not be put into words. At the family home, police found Hannah still alive. She'd managed to call 999 and give some details of the attack. 15 miles away in a cemetery, Clifford was found seriously injured. He'd shot himself with his crossbow. In court, on a video link, he sat in a wheelchair as he admitted 3 murders, false imprisonment of Louise, and possession of offensive weapons, a crossbow and a knife. Clifford denied a charge of raping Louise and will go on trial for that later this year. After the murders, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said she was considering tightening the laws around crossbows. There is no registration system, and they can be bought easily online. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
Still to come on the UK tonight, a 14-year-old is arrested over the fatal stabbing of 12-year-old Leo Ross in Birmingham. We'll have the latest on that. Plus, we return to Southport on the eve of the sentencing of Axel Rudakabana. A 12-year-old boy who was fatally stabbed in Birmingham yesterday has now been named by police as Leo Ross. A 14-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of his murder. This latest shocking example of youth knife crime came as the Prime Minister set out new initiatives to try to tackle the problem ahead tomorrow of the sentencing of Axel Rudakabana for the murder of 3 young girls in Southport last year. Here's our correspondent, Lisa Holland.
One of the things I learnt, guys, was that
everyone of this South London community group has lost someone to knife crime, friends, colleagues and loved ones.
the government is saying that there needs to be things like IDs, biometrics, that there needs to be checks on people. What's your views on that?
How's that going to work when we've got so much fraudsters? They're being reactive, but they're not being proactive, because that's not going to work.
Tanya Hogan's boyfriend was stabbed to death last year. She also says her 15-year-old son was chased by someone with a bladed weapon. In response, he bought an 8-inch zombie knife.
He went online and he purchased a knife. He sent it to his grandma's address, and, you know, if grandma didn't intercept and open the parcel, I don't know what would have happened. And I asked my son, why would you go and purchase a knife? So I feel safe, Mum. Everyone outside has got knives. I don't feel safe.
It's already illegal to sell knives to under 18s, but critics say existing ID checks aren't enough. On average, in England and Wales, someone is killed by knife crime every day and a half. Kitchen knives are the most commonly used weapon. It's estimated 140,000 teenagers carried a weapon in the last year. In a park in Birmingham, another fatal stabbing. The life of 12-year-old Leo Ross couldn't be saved. His alleged killer is aged 14.
I've met far too many families devastated by this senseless violence. It is unacceptable that these murder weapons can be bought with 2 clicks. Technology is there to stop it, and we're going to take action.
Last July's attack in Southport, in which 3 little girls were stabbed to death, was described as a line in the sand by the Prime Minister. The killer, Axel Rudiker-Barner, bought his weapon on Amazon when he was 17. Amazon says it already has ID checks and rules in place to verify buyers' ages and is urgently investigating the Southport case. But the government wants companies to go further using facial recognition.
Where somebody's determined to get a knife,
they can get.
Those affected feel action is long overdue.
What concerns me is about how knives are obtained in our communities. Whatever strict measures that can be put in place needs to be put in place with a state of urgency.
Can these new measures really make a difference when people can actually just go to the kitchen drawer and get a knife?
I don't think it's the sole answer, but anything that can be done, any improvement, if it's a 5% improvement, that's a 5% of a better opportunity of keeping a young life safe.
The proposed changes won't reduce knife crime overnight, but campaigners say something is better than nothing to tackle an endemic issue. Lisa Holland, Sky News, South London.
As we've already been saying, Axel Rudiker-Barner, the teenager who early this week pleaded guilty to the murder of those 3 young girls in Southport last summer, is going to be sentenced tomorrow in Liverpool. My colleague Sarah-Jane Meat will be bringing you coverage of that here on Sky News right throughout the day. But tonight, Sarah-Jane is back in Southport, a community still torn apart by those tragic events. She's been having a word with Mark Foreman, who's been instrumental in raising funds for the families of the victims. And SJ started by asking if the people of the town can ever truly recover.
I think it will recover, and unlike with the grieving process that if a relative or somebody close to you dies, it does take time. And I guess it's the trauma thing of ups and downs, and things will, little traumas or little T's or big T's to say what affects you more going forth. And people will get on, and people will start coming back to Southport. And I mean, if you walk down the high street and if you walk to our parks and the schools and everything, people are getting on. And people are getting on with their own lives, but it's been tainted. It's been tainted from the actions of one individual and obviously the rioters the next night. And we are getting on, and we are grieving.
This week, Southport was steeling itself for a trial, a long trial, having to relive the trauma of the events of the summer. That all changed on Monday when a guilty plea was entered. What was the reaction to that? Because you were getting ready for the long haul, steeling yourself mentally for that. And now it will all be finished by the end of this week. What was the reaction like to that? Was there a sense of relief?
There's a sense of relief, but there's also a sense of people want answers. People want to understand why it happened, especially why it happened in Southport, why it happened to our friends, our families, our kids, our community. Because it makes no sense in my world, in my life, because these sort of things don't happen around the corner from where we live. I've lived in London before, and even then you kind of expect, higher crime rates and stuff, but even nothing like this. So there's a general feeling of, I guess, frustration, and there will be anger, and depending on what the trial says tomorrow for the sentencing, I don't know what will happen, but I'm hoping that it's going to be closure. I'm hoping that it's going to be people can start getting on with their lives, people can start healing more and grieving more and just forget it happened. I know it's not going to be possible to forget.
You can see more of that interview throughout the day here tomorrow on Sky News, where we will have full coverage of the sentencing of the Southport killer. That's from 10 tomorrow morning. We'll also have a special edition of The UK Tonight, presented by Sarah Jane, live from Southport. That's at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Join Sarah Jane for that. Next, the size and the timing of President Donald Trump's threatened tariffs on other countries, including us here in the UK, are becoming a bit clearer. He says he's considering a 10% across-the-board tariff on all Chinese goods as soon as the 1st of February. That same day, Mexico and Canada face trade levies of up to 25%. And President Trump has put others on notice, including the European Union. Sky's economics and data editor Ed Conway has been taking a bit of a closer look.
Let me start with quite an eye-catching chart, one that's caught the eye of none other than Donald Trump. This is showing you how much tariffs have raised as a percentage of total US federal revenues, going all the way back to 1798. And perhaps you can make something out. Look, for much of that first century of independence, the majority of federal revenues came from tariffs. Now, actually, it's closer to about 2%. It's under 2% right now. And so the argument is, look, could you not just raise more money via tariffs instead of things like income tax? Well, maybe a bit, but have a look at this. I'm going to take that same data and do it not just as a percentage of total revenues, but as a percentage of the size of the US economy. This is a kind of probably a better way of comparing it, because the economy was a little bit bigger compared with those tariffs back in the past than you might have thought. In fact, even in that period of maximal protectionism, the early Hamiltonian days of the United States, you can see that tariffs never really accounted for more than about 6% of total US GDP, and that's kind of been the case for much of history. And the size of the state was much bigger than that. You see, you needed a lot more money to try and finance the state, particularly when it came to wars. That's the World War II there. And that's basically where income tax came. It came in to fill that gap. Now, you certainly could raise more in the way of tariffs. And when you look back, actually, through the history of tariffs, so this is a different thing. This is looking at the total rate, the average rate of tariffs going back to the 1820s. And you can see it certainly was a lot higher before. It was really high back in 1828. There was a tariff that brought it up really high around there before the Civil War. They came down a little bit here in the 1913 to 1920 period, Woodrow Wilson. Then up again for Smoot-Hawley. That was a big act that raised tariffs on basically everyone, agriculture and industry. And then they came down again. And that's kind of the period we've been living through recently. Very low tariffs in the US and around the world. And it started, you can see, it's just started to tick up in the last Donald Trump period in office. But it does raise the question, what next? And if you're looking at who actually pays tariffs in the US, China is at 3.6%, Mexico and Canada considerably lower, the UK down at 3.6%. Where could they go? Well, Donald Trump has talked about maybe 10%. He's talked about 25%, but I'm afraid the short answer is right now, we don't really know for sure.
We're going to return now to the government's plans to try to tackle knife crime. And while events in Birmingham and Southport and South London may be extreme examples, tragedies like these are sadly all too common, as I'm sure many of you already know. Joining me to talk about this is anti-knife crime campaigner Farron Paul, who has survived 2 knife attacks, Farron, and you're also raising awareness, I know, through an art exhibition called the Artism Collective, and that's a piece of the work behind us. We'll talk about that in a minute, Farron, but I'd like to start by asking about what happened to you, because you were stabbed several times across 2 different occasions.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's correct, yeah. It weren't gang-related, it weren't retaliation or nothing, it was just simply me defending people in my family. And unfortunately, I was stabbed 9 times on each separate occasion. One happened in Tottenham, Broadwater Farm, and the other one happened in Oxford Circus.
One of the busiest shopping streets in Europe.
And it happened at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening.
So in daylight, effectively.
Yeah, literally.
It was just beggars belief that people can be so brazen in causing this kind of harm, bringing this kind of violence to streets where... I mean, do you remember what happened that day? And other people must have been wondering what on earth is going on.
Exactly that, you know. After I did actually get stabbed, I tried to go into one of the surrounding shops to get in there, and the person literally locked the door. But I do understand it was through probably fear and shock, you know. He saw a lot of things going on, and it's not every day that someone sees someone using a knife on someone and somebody bleeding heavily, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting that you have to qualify it by saying this wasn't gang crime, because people often make that assumption.
Yeah.
But we've seen in the past day, we saw last summer in Southport, we've seen in Germany today, as well as it happens, that there are different reasons, but knives seem to be the running theme. Because why?
Yes, there are so many contributing factors to knife crime. It goes beyond gang-related things, you know. I believe that, you know, currently in the UK, it's become nearly something that's engraved into society, into the younger people. And I don't believe that there's enough, how can I say, constraints and control from the social media platforms and key workers and, you know, probably say local authorities, but collectively, from community through to grassroots organisations, right the way through to government, if we can get together and put in realistic, feasible solutions, I think that's going to be the best course of action.
A lot of people feel they're sort of distant from this happening on the streets. You've been as close to it as anybody would not want to be, of course. You often hear that kids are carrying knives for protection, not to actually use them, but just by having them means they're more likely to be used.
And it's become a fashion, I'd say.
Still now? Still, despite everything that's been talked about over the recent years, they're still being glorified?
Well, it's been glorified and it's kind of engraved into revenge and retribution, you know. When somebody's been hurt and somebody's been physically maimed, they have friends and they have family that will want to seek revenge, you know. People have emotions and it's not easy. Like, I'm a person who has scars and injuries from knife crime, you know, and no matter, even though it's happened a long time ago, there are times where you sit down and you look at your scars or there are pains that resonate with your injuries. So these are things that people need to understand. There's so many contributing factors from mental health to emotional to physical trauma that we've got a vicious circle of knife crime. And, you know, when these young people have that accessibility to these weapons easily, you'd see that these people are getting, gradually, the weapons are getting bigger and bigger.
Yes.
And it's almost a thing like, if his knife is that size, if I get a longer knife, that actually creates a bigger space for me. And hopefully, if I bring it out and it's big enough, that's going to be a deterrent from someone.
But we've heard about all these amnesties for things like zombie knives and bans for them, and now the government is talking about two-stage identification to make it harder online. But at the same time, knives are important tools that people have in their kitchen drawers. How do you think that's going to work, what the government's doing?
I feel like, you know, we have to explore different avenues, and I do feel like there are things we can put in place to maybe protect people that will need weapons for feasible causes, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you do have a trade that requires a certain weapon or a certain instrument, then maybe you should produce credentials to prove your trade, you know? And we should get more stronger on the licensing, you know? I think things like this, putting in place, will prevent people who ain't supposed to get weapons offline from getting them, and not affect the people that do actually need these tools.
But everyone has them in their house. You know, the people be chopping up vegetables for dinner right now using a kitchen knife.
And that's a fair point. And I'd like to say to you, them same people have medicine cabinets that's out of reach of children, OK? But I'd say to you at the same time, more knives kill young people than medicine cabinets do. So maybe it's a chance for everyone's household and parents to maybe pay more attention on containing their weapons away from, if they do have children that's out on the streets, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if we can have enough attention to pay to medicine cabinets, let's start to put that same energy into kitchen utensils.
That's a really good point. Farron, let's just finish off on artisan, because you're trying to turn this into something a bit positive to raise awareness. And I know you're not alone in that, but just tell us about this picture behind us, because this is something this is a sword that was actually given up in an amnesty, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. So a young man, he wanted to go through the positive transition, and in 2022, he handed that weapon in. And I've got a friend called Martin Jegede, and I've always known he's a talented artist. And I said to myself, you know, I'd always get these weapons, and I'd hand them into the police, and that would kind of be the end factor. Although it's a good job done, I want to see longevity in a positive transition. And I thought to myself, me and Martin really sat down and thought about how we'd go about making a piece. And after a little while, we thought about the heartbeat line. So this is one of Martin's pieces called the Impulse piece, and it's the, and we call it a heartbeat blade. And I just want to say thank you to Artism and Denise, because they're putting together some, like it's an event that's going to be down in Charing Cross.
OK.
And it should be frequently used where young people can come down and explore the world of art and listen to music. And we're really trying to have something that brings different walks of life together. And we believe art is something that everyone can express their emotions through.
It's great to hear it, and I really appreciate you coming in to talk about what happened to you and your point of view on this.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Farron.
R.I.P. Rob, bless you.
Coming up here on the UK Tonight. That is indeed Sunita, and I will be speaking to her and the man behind the musical magic, one of Stock Aitken and Waterman, Pete Waterman, on receiving today a very special honour.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
The music producers behind some of the very biggest pop hits of the 80s and the 90s have been honoured with their own blue plaque today. Stock, Aitken and Waterman helped to launch the careers of stars like Rick Astley and Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue as well. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer went to meet them at the Hit Factory where the blue plaque is going to be. I should be so lucky.
From the sampled vocals of Mel and Kim to the instantly memorable lyrics of Rick Astley's biggest hits, Stock Aitken and Waterman's songs ruled the UK charts, influencing the entire sound of the late 80s. Theirs was one of the most successful partnerships in the history of pop, pioneers, if you like, of the producer as artist ethos. And their contribution now being marked with this special blue plaque. This location was home to the Hit Factory, a production line approach where artists would come to provide vocals to a pre-written song which they'd lay down over a fully produced backing track. Forget about artistic input, most of the hard graft had already been done. In 1988, their success went into overdrive thanks to this collaboration with a young Australian soap actress they'd never actually heard of.
When she turned up at the studio, we were unaware. Pete forgot to tell us she was turning up.
I wasn't even here.
So we had to come up with the song pretty quick.
In 1989, their songs made up a whopping 27% of the UK singles market.
We had a method of working and we tried to taper the songs and the tracks to how we saw the public would perceive the artists. And I think we were quite successful in that regard.
Back in the day, most of their hits were recorded on a simple 24-track tape machine. But could AI replicate their Hits Factory approach now?
AI won't work because you can't put emotion in. We had emotion. That's the difference between AI and what we did.
While some of their hits have stood the test of time better than others, their contribution and influence on British pop of the late 80s is indisputable. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Really delighted to say, and certainly the inner 11-year-old boy in me is delighted to say, I'm joined now by Pete Waterman, but also one of the stars of the Hit Factory, Sunita. And Sunita, I know you are in an interval for your show,
Yes.
which is, now that's what I call musical, so I'm going to come to you very quickly. Tell us about Toy Boy, writing it with Stock Aitken and Waterman, and what it was like to work with them.
Oh, amazing. First of all, hi, Pete. So much fun. So much fun. And that plaque is so deserved because that's where it all happened. And we just felt so lucky to be going to the Hit Factory, recording new songs. And of course, the best part was sitting in the missile room, watching the videos, MTV and everything while the creation was going on. The show I'm doing at the moment actually features a lot of your tracks, Pete.
I'm not surprised. I mean, does it feature so macho? Because that's another one. I don't think that was a Stock Aitken and Waterman hit, obviously.
Wasn't, but Spin Me Right Round, isn't it? In fact, it's just gone off the tannoy's on. So they were playing in tandem at the same time when you were showing the preview. But
Listen,
yeah.
Sunita, I will let you go because I really appreciate you giving us your time in between being on and off stage. So it's really good to have you with us. But let me come to you, Pete.
Thank you so much. Congratulations, Pete.
Thanks, Anita. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Pete, appreciate you being with us as well. I mean, what an honour. I mean, you've won loads of awards in your time, and platinum discs, and letters after your name and all that kind of thing. Where does the blue plaque sit?
I'm still, to be honest, I'm still a bit gobsmacked by it all. I mean, when you see it on the wall there, and you've walked around London over the last 60 years, seen all these famous people with their names on the wall, and there you suddenly are. It's like, there was about 100 people turned up, and I still can't quite get over it, really. It's like seeing your tombstone when you're not dead.
Well, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't see it in that way. You're up there with Handel and Shakespeare. I'm sure has got one. Darwin. I mean, these are sort of legends of British culture, really.
Yeah, and of course, literally 50 feet from where that plaque is, Charles Dickens lived when his father was in the Marshalsea prison. So, we're in good company around there.
As I said at the start there, I mean, the 11-year-old boy in me is singing along to I Should Be So Lucky. I mean, it just takes me straight back. And how did you have such a knack of creating so many hits in such a short space of time?
It was hard work. And I say today, we'd all been doing this job for about 15, 20 years each.
Yeah.
So you had 3 people coming in 3 different ways, but all with vast experience. And what that experience taught us was, don't muck about. If it didn't work, don't push it. Find what worked and then get on with it.
Pete, final question from me. You must have a favourite from them. What's your favourite from the factory?
Well, it's Mel and Kim, respectively, because that's the ultimate story. They knocked on the door, said, we want to be pop stars. And we said, you look like pop stars to us, come in. They told us their story and we wrote Respectable. And, and that is the start of Stock Aitken and Waterman.
I mean, that is a good favourite. And I can sing it in my own head right now. We're just seeing the plaque as well. Pete, look, I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on being awarded with that. And thanks for joining us here on the UK Tonight.
Bless you, and thanks very much indeed for having us.
That is Pete Waterman, of course, of Stock Aitken and Waterman fame. Plenty of other things as well. Let's get straight to the sport now. Teddy's here.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Players that fall out of the academy system need something to fall back on.
Do you think we have a responsibility to not only produce elite players, but also good people?
This is the key point.
I've had a really in-depth look into academy football and how it works with certain clubs.
Can you all play in our first team? No, and we're really realistic with the boys. The success is reaching your full potential.
Coming up in this episode, I'll find out what the whole package looks like for the academy footballers.
First and foremost, they try to create a good young person.
At the time, I didn't realise how it can sort of help you, both on and off the pitch.
I'd been there since I was 5.5, so I'd came through the whole way. The staff who was always there, and I'm talking about the whole of the staff. I'm not just about the staff who were on the pitch, I'm talking about the kitchen staff, the medical stuff, the people who clean our kit and stuff. They mean everything, so I'm playing out now on the pitch, but I just hope that they've got a massive smile on their face because I'm doing it for them as well.
It's been a special rise for me and the club. I think there's lots of different ups and downs. As much as we all want to become professional footballers, I think it's hard. Not everyone can do it. First and foremost, they try to create a good young person. Definitely the club's been very good at that, whilst also making it enjoyable on the pitch as well.
Clubs are investing significant amounts of money themselves into academies, and it's growing every year. But there's big money to be made in return.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thanks a lot, Teddy. Time for a quick look at the weather now. It's turning wetter and windier tomorrow, while Storm Eowyn will bring potentially disruptive winds for many on Friday. The UK has widespread wind, rain and snow warnings in place, as you can see, amber for wind through central parts, while Ireland has a red wind warning in the southwest, orange elsewhere. Before then, mostly a fine evening this evening, but the southeast looks rather murky and locally wet, while the west can expect further showers. The UK looks dry overnight, bar the odd shower in the west, but expect frost and fog in some eastern parts. Ireland will turn wet and windy, with the rain edging into Northern Ireland until dawn. That's all from us here on the UK Tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage and watch us for free wherever having to watch. Stream it online, of course. Sarah Jane's back tomorrow at 8. Yalda is up with the world from DC next.